My name is Gabriel Quaglia. I work for SADOD and Peer Support Community Partners as the program manager for the direct service provider program, providing peer grief support to people who work in the field of substance use disorder, human services, homelessness services. 2015, 16 or so, I started working in the field of harm reduction. I was a person in long-term recovery, and I was attracted to harm reduction um, there. And pretty much around that same time was when fentanyl started to enter the drug supply in the United States, and especially here in Western Massachusetts. So while I was doing this work, I also saw this huge increase of, people passing away from overdose, but not only overdose, but all these ancillary issues that came up with fentanyl in the drug supply, such as infections and endocarditis and things. And so I saw workforce that was already kind of first, in real time. I kind of saw how this workforce that was already pretty stressed with the work that they were doing really increased the amount of people that they were working with, losing them, and also dealing directly with non-fatal overdoses, even, which is a pretty heavy thing for people to deal with. Helping them deal with infections and things like that. So I saw that there was this critically needed workforce, at the same time that it was becoming increasingly hard to work in the field, because no matter what you do, there is a toll with that of losing people that you develop relationships, sometimes even daily relationships, that people are seeing every single day and talking to, and knowing all about them, passing away. And just kind of seeing that made me extremely concerned for the workforce. The things that I know happened and I'd seen happen previously in my life, but just the frequency of them and like being directly next to them, such as I had one participant I worked with. Actually, it was a couple, a husband and a wife. They had been homeless on the street for quite a while. The wife, she had gone to a program, to try to, become abstinent, or, do whatever it is that she felt she needed to do. And she was, lasted about a couple weeks and was kicked out of the program. I think it was actually, I was told that it was because she got into an argument because she didn't want to make her bed properly with the counselor, and she was kicked out. She went and used that night and she died, which was, extremely tragic and really kind of affected me. But that, led to a lot of other things, like just really thinking about the fact that, like, I only knew about this because I knew her husband and I was still working with him ongoing basis, and he was able to tell me about this. And like so there was first the kind of seeing that and seeing, like, wondering how many people am I working with that just disappear and I never know what happens to them, and feeling like it was probably a pretty large number, kind of held a lot of weight. But also seeing at the time that, like, her family had didn't have a very good relationship with her, and they weren't very resourced as well, and they weren't having any kind of ceremony. I'm not even sure they were able to have any kind of burial. And just kind of seeing that, like, not only did the community, like her husband, not have any kind of area, anything to, like, really kind of memorialize her death, and also other people in the community who were friends with her and loved her, that I worked with as well as an ongoing basis. And then just kind of also kind of, again, looking at the scale of what this is probably happening in other places and I don't know, but also just kind of feeling the tragedy of that, like, all these people who I love and respect, and I was so honored to be able to work with on a daily basis, like wondering how many of them just kind of passed away and slipped off the face of the earth. So felt, I mean, I felt like it was a lot to hold and to think about, in terms, um, as some people I think can go through work without really thinking about it too much, about what the larger implications are when things happen like that, right? But I think myself, I can speak for myself, but I think it goes for a lot of other harm reduction workers and people who work in human services, that we're usually more apt to kind of think about these things and feel the weight of them, regardless if we try to keep a very professional relationship with someone or not. You're always going to have that natural inclination to, feel close to somebody. And, I mean, even, in harm reduction, I not only respected, but I loved the people that I worked with. So that's like an example of one story that, like, it was something in and of itself that was difficult to deal with. But then, when you step back and look at the scale of what's going on and how many people I work with that disappear and I never hear from them again, and wondering what's happening to them, and like how many people are just slipping from the face of this earth who deserve to be honored and thought about and memorialized, and and then also seeing the effect of, like, on our spouse. Of course, that was like, it was nothing compared to what I, what I felt was, nothing next to that. But then even also within that community of people, people who use drugs, were grieving this, member of the community that was well loved by everybody. And seeing that, like, it just, I don't even want to say it doesn't get the same weight that, like, that there's, like, it's almost like as a society, we want to push it away and, like, forget about it. And not like they want to, that's what our society was doing. And that was a lot to kind of think about and hold. And then, I mean, just seeing all of the little things, like, again, I can come up with individual answers, but it's the weight of a lot of things, of seeing how stigma affects the people that I work with, and, like, affects, not only on an individual basis, but on a collective basis. And feeling like there was, I don't know, some sort of need as well to, like, memorialize folks and remember them and let people know it's okay to talk about these things, rather than trying to, like, push through life without doing that.
Yeah, I think
We do a lot of different things. We bring trainings out to organizations that, directly there to talk about not only grief, from our work, but just other kind of ancillary issues as they come up that people feel are related to grief, or, maybe somewhat more protective of them to deal with the grief and loss from their work. And, a lot of times when we're, giving these trainings or after these trainings, people will just say something to the effect of, like, I'm really glad that we're talking about this, right? That it's not, not only, to some degree, we're having, like, some didactic stuff talking about these issues that don't get talked about, but then, soliciting their perspectives to talk about these issues that don't usually get talked about, or that don't get recognized. And, it can go everything from, this is something I really wanted to talk about, and there was been no container for that, right? All the way to, I hadn't really even thought about this, or thought about the effect of X or Y or Z on my work, and how it's all interrelated. That's kind of one thing. And then, like, on another level, with, like, the groups that we have on a weekly basis, we get some people who come all the time, and some people who kind of, like, pop in and out, and some people will sample it and just come one or two times. But there's people out there, who come to our groups, when they really need to, right? They come to talk about issues that the other people in your life will not understand. And maybe you don't want to put on them, if, even if you could, type thing, that, like, someone is not going to understand, who doesn't do the work, that, like, what it's like to have someone come and recount an extremely traumatic experience to you, or talk about, the ways, the system is preventing them from getting the medical care that they need to save their life. Right. Like, a lot of people aren't going to understand that. And they think, and, of course, even people who don't work in this, a lot of times we're problem solvers as people. Right. Well, oh, did you try this, or did you try that? but like, usually we've tried it all and we know, and that's not what we're looking for. We want someone who like understands that, and to talk about what do you do when there is no answer, when you've tried everything and it's not working, and you can't, get someone into, you know, medical treatment for their diabetes because they, miss appointments occasionally and they won't, nobody wants to deal with that. And you're trying to, but you, at the same time, you're trying to hold that, like, they need this life-saving care for their diabetes. And it shouldn't matter that they miss a lot of appointments, because they still need that regardless of how many appointments they've missed. Right. And like dealing with that frustration. And then, people who don't do this work might be, oh, did you call the manager or whatever, and it's like, no, it's not what I'm talking about. Like, this is just painful. And I want someone to listen who will just either just listen to it or listen to it and understand it. And, and it's those people, I think, my coworker Jill and I feel like those are the people that we're most, I don't know, proud, or I don't know if happy is the word, but that we're glad we're able to serve those people, because we've all had those moments where we didn't know what to do, when we couldn't talk to our spouse about it. We couldn't talk to our friends, our brothers, our sisters, our siblings, our cousins, because they wouldn't understand it. And like, sometimes they don't even want to hear it. When there's nothing, when you just ask and like, they're like, no, there's nothing. It feels like nobody really cares that you're doing something that's really can kind of put you in a mentally precarious place. That's not very good for your mental health or your, physical health even. You can start to have effects. And when there's nothing there, it feels like, you know why you do it. I wasn't going to say, why do I do this? Because you know why you do it. You do it for the people. But like, at the end of the day, you wonder like why it is that there's nothing there for you. So that kind of encourages hopelessness. And that, you know, um, and the other way around, like just having something actually, you know, um, just shows that there's people who care and are thinking about it, and other people who have your same problems. And at least it makes it easier to, see solutions, or try to hopefully find ways to like work through it. Or, just having someone, who's been through burnout and took time off and said they were able to come back better is like, that's a giant thing, rather than having someone just suggest that. Like, you don't know if it will or won't work or isn't going to do anything. And you think, yeah, I'll take this time off and then I'm never coming back. But when you have someone that you can talk to who's like, yeah, I did that. And maybe even have someone who could say like, yeah, I did it, but then I didn't come back because I didn't, I wasn't feeling it. But just knowing that that was like an option that's okay to do, on top of the fact that like it's available. Maybe you can, maybe it'll be helpful to you, maybe it won't. But like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for just having someone have that same experience, that like you can see that light, and also see that like people actually care about it. So I think the systems work a lot better. You want to have, one-on-one things that people can do. You have, trainings or workshops people can attend. You have groups on a regular basis, right? So making sure that you have that kind of menu for folks as much as you possibly can, because it's hard to do everything all the time, but making that a lack of policy or system decisions that we think are helpful are being ignored or dismissed or not tried effectively, are very much tied into the grief about these deaths. Because if this was done X, Y, or Z, then I wouldn't be grieving this person's death. When I, had a friend die from exposure, I'm pretty sure he overdosed and then was outside and died from exposure. Like, I never got the exact whole report of what happened, but it seemed like that was what happened. He fell out in a semi-wooded area and, was found dead the next day. That's very tied to feeling that there's insufficient, supports for people who are experiencing homelessness. When, you have a friend who, I had a friend who had repeated medical issues, and eventually that were all associated with it. He eventually, he kind of died connected to them. But, it was right before he was able to get into a program or he was going to be housed in a place that had on-site medical care, right? The very next week, like he literally died like the week before he was going to be going into this program that had actual doctors on site and things like that he needed, but he was living homeless with these extreme medical issues, and that just got worse, kept getting worse because of like these repeated incidents he was having. And just to feel like the system failed him because there was no, acute care, and there's still very little. Like the program he was getting into was new, and it was, they only can take so many people. So how many? And then I'm thinking, how many other people are in the same boat as him? How many family members are grieving someone's death because like we aren't doing the things that we need to do? And those things are usually tied very closely together, and they end up being stuff that we talk about. So that's, we had ideas that we of what we thought was people were interested in, but also we've kind of always kind of consistently crafted it to be responsive to what people need and that we find out on an ongoing basis. And I'd say, any area or community could do that, as long as, though I think it's very important to approach the work from that way, to not just say that we're going to do X and Y again, like we'll just have a system and we just give you these, these scripts and you're good to go. Of course, it's good to have scripts, right? But to do that, but then be very open to like feedback and ways that it might work for different communities, because what works in, even like, what's what's available in Boston is very different, kind of from what we have in Western Mass, just because of population differences and population density and things like that. And, other resources available, and, what might work in, Western Massachusetts might be, a little closer to what would work in Kentucky, but very different still. And then what might work in Chicago would be different than what would work in Boston, And I think a lot of it is also just like eliciting that feedback and being, we thought the most important things to do was we have a twice weekly group that we do on Mondays and Fridays here in Massachusetts. One Monday is in the evening, actually, after work time, and one is Friday during work time. And we did that very intentionally because we wanted to actually make sure that people could attend during work time, because that is something that actually makes, people again feel that their work is being responsive to their needs, to say, here's a resource for you that you can attend during work time. Kind of monthly trainings that we do. And kind of, as I was just discussing, it's not all about just grief. We have a couple that are about grief. And again, we try not to like make them about training people to help others with grief. It's about, helping direct service providers at least kind of even contextualize to some degree, or just open a discussion about grief and the grief that we experience through work. And then just kind of other ancillary issues, or, similar things that people find are helpful to them within their work. Whether that's like, just general tools people can use to the day to help them deal with stress, which, grief is one of the stressors, of course, to just, how to engage in advocacy. If that's something, again, if they find that stuff is tied to systemic issues and they want to do something about it, like how would they go about like, doing something about it? To, how to kind of work with like family members is another instance of, because like that's something you usually aren't trained to do in any capacity, like even in regular human services, it's not really talked about, but family members a lot of times will become involved, right? And like working with them is very different than working with people who use drugs. And like just some information on like that, just things that people find are kind of like helpful when they're dealing with this grief, or things that come up around grief. The training, people respond very well to them. And it seems like a lot of organizations, want us to kind of intermittently do these to kind of keep these conversations about things related to peer grief support and things going in their area. And so I think, just kind of like normalizing, I guess, is maybe the word, to like having staff kind of, consistently do these kind of trainings and groups